name is Helen. I used to be a showgirl, but that was 40 years ago, round about the time that neoliberalism assailed us all. I am here to have a wee little chat about Marxism with some very special guests to whom you will be introduced shortly. We'd like to acknowledge here that we're meeting on the stolen land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to the elders, past and present, who gathered here to share their stories, just as we're doing tonight. This was, and always will be, Aboriginal land, except capitalism ruined all of that. So, in ascending order of age, and I should say that Professor Gary Foley has been waylaid in Canberra, where we can only hope that he's doing untold damage to the state, which permits its partner economy to ruin us all. He's very sorry not to be here. And I believe pissed off was the term that he used. But we have a boomer replacement. But first, in ascending order of age, this lovely lassie is Ms. Alyx Gorman. She is the daughter of communists, and she is the close cousin of chic. She's the editor of absolutely everything, I believe, at Time Out Australia. Is that correct?
Yes, editorial director.
Ooh, nice. You're
familiarly acquainted with the bourgeoisie by becoming one.
Yeah. You may know her notable work on wearable textiles from the Saturday paper. She's certainly the nation's least annoying writer on fashion because she's never once used the term a classic red lip or, to the best of my knowledge, a fun and flirty skirt. The fuck is flirty clothing?
That being said, I can wear both of them at once.
Yeah.
I just won't describe them thusly.
I know Alyx as one of very few people working in Australian media who knows her Marx and can apply it without shame. She can probably also wear an asymmetric top and get away with it.
No one can do that.
Mr. Nazeem Hussain is, importantly, the son of Mumtaz. He's also the frequent object of ASIO suspicion. With Amir Rahman, he forged Fear of a Brown Planet, a duo that was, in my honest opinion, as a then comedy critic, the actual tits. It was something new and brash and thrilling. Apparently he was on some reality show, I don't know.
Gotta get paid.
In which he won the nation's hearts and minds and ended racism for good.
I also ate ostrich anus and goat's testicles, but anyway, yeah.
You know him from Legally Brown, you know him from Get Crackin', you know him from Salam Cafe, you know him from Selfless Good Works Everywhere. We may spare him when the revolution comes. I'm sure many of you will be disappointed to learn that Professor Foley can't be with us tonight. But he certainly thought that this gentleman was a suitable replacement, and this gentleman was honoured to step in at the last moment and be a replacement for Gary Foley.
Nobody can replace Gary.
Nobody can.
I'm not here as a replacement.
Anyway, Mr. Max Gillies would likely be a sir if he'd ever caved and offered no resistance to the fictions of Regency.
I'll regard that as an honour.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did they ever try to make you a sir?
No, and Tony Abbott hadn't reintroduced the possibility, I guess.
Nonetheless, I imagine he has a string of honourable letters following his name. But, you know, smash the fucking state and all its codes. These letters would never, in any case, spell out this man's status as one of the nation's most significant satirists. He is a piss-taker of power, an occasional mocker of monarchs, and a person committed since the 1960s to show Australia to itself in a manner unmoderated by empire. He's done a lot of telly, and if you're about my age, which I can't see very well, but I do detect a youthful glow, so you're probably not very menopausal, very perimenopausal, like me. But if you are, you'll remember the Gillies report, and you'll perhaps remember it, as I do, as a glimpse of another more bearable place. But I'm just, oh God, I do go on. We'll have questions at the end, and I'm very pleased that our comrades from Socialist Alternative are here to sell and discuss with you the contents of their paper, Red Flag, and I will also be around to answer other questions. But I just wanted to make it kind of clear so we can have a good discussion about the sorts of questions we might not want. I'm assuming, can you tell me, I mean, how many of you here are just sort of like Marx curious? Like, it's okay.
I think I am.
Are they, or no, you've all read Capital? Who's read Capital? Yeah, like no one reads Volume 2. That shit is boring. It's got equations in it. Anyway, I wrote something down.
I don't understand that joke.
It's not very funny. It's yeah. It's not very. I mean, we were just having a little kind of like, aren't we the Marxists moment together, you and I, sir, weren't we, comrade? Anyway, comrades, siblings, brunch eaters, boomers, and all the workers of the world. A category, by the way, that includes those who have no formally recognised work but must work in any case to survive this fucking world. I'm going to answer a few questions right now, Marxist FAQ, in the hope that we can have none of that nonsense at the end about how many people did or did not go to the Gulag, okay? So, my Marx FAQ, which I've been working on for the last few months because I've been flogging a book which is available on Amazon. I find that hilarious. And sad. It's also here. And I'll sign it if you want, but if you don't, that's fine. All right, so the Marxist FAQs that I have been receiving for the last few years or months. But Helen, you are so naive. The instructions that Marx laid out for communism simply did not work. All right. First, there's only a tiny part of Marx that gives us an idea of communism in practice. What he actually offers us is a detailed description of capitalism. That's important to remember. He describes how capitalism coerces and governs many of our social relations. Not everything, but a fuck of a lot. Second, even Lenin admitted that what he was engaged in 100 years ago was not communism, but state capitalism. I'm not going to say that the Soviet experiment went great, but no one, save for that douche Lord Stalin, ever said that it was communism. It was a transitional state, blah, blah, blah. Marxism is not the state. Marxism imagines a future with no state whatsoever. It is an urging to freedom through the description of the system under which we currently live. Communism can't really be said to have failed, certainly not as spectacularly as capitalism has. Here's another one. But Helen, communism can never work because it relies on people being good. No, this is not true. Marxism makes very few presumptions about human nature at all. It's one of the things that makes it a little bit different from other philosophies. Marx says very little about our essence, our spirit essence as human beings. And the little that he does have to say has to do with one thing, our innate need to be productive, to make and do shit. What makes us human is that. And there's this great line from Capital, Volume 1. But what distinguishes the worst architect from the best of bees is this, that the architect raises his structure in imagination before he erects it in reality. We like to make shit. We like to... That's one of the very, very few assumptions. So he says little more about our non-biological impulses than we like to make stuff. So unlike the theorists of capitalism, and there were a few, Ricardo, Smith, Locke, they did set it down. It's not like capitalism is an unplanned, untheorised system. They make lots of presumptions about human possibilities, which they say are very narrow. They say that we're naturally competitive. They say that market profit is the expression of our human essence. And they say, am I boring the shit out of anyone here? Is it all okay for you? Yeah, I mean, if you're just Marx curious, this stuff can be a little dense. I think I've actually bored Nazeem shitless in recent days.
You actually been. I feel like I've had a short course in Marxism. I feel very enlightened.
So they say in different ways, the theorists of capitalism of the past and of the present, that inequality is natural, and that owning a thing like land is somehow in our bodies, in our essence.
Don't forget they think we're rational.
Yeah, they also think we're rational. So capitalism for these guys comes from the deepest part of us. Now, another thing that sets Marx apart, I'll get a sharp in a minute, I promise. But I just don't want that young thing from the IPA to say, in fact, I will just shut you the fuck up if you do that. I mean, if you want to go and make a point about how Marxism is bullshit and utopian, get a job at the Australian, okay? You've got the rest of the culture to spill your barely read feces on. This is a time for Marxists and the Marx curious, and the rest of you can get knotted.
Helen, these are your friends. Actually, I really love it when you're angry. It's like the best type of Helen Razer.
It happens often. Anyway, look, we'll go into all that materialism shit later. I write and talk a lot.
Okay, back yourself. It's very interesting. Go back to what you were saying.
Go back to what I was saying. Are you bored, Max?
No, they're just a bit shy. They're not.
All right. Well, I can't see, so I don't know if they're bored.
I always learn from you.
Oh, you say that now.
No, it's these apologies that get a bit tiresome. Just
I'm Catholic.
get back to the end of the thing.
All right, I'm going to give you another. You want a Marx quote?
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is a Marx and Engels one, actually. I think it's from Preface to the Critique of Political Economy from 1859. It is not the consciousness of men, sexist language, that determines their existence, but their social existence that determines their consciousness. In other words, we fit our consciousness to explain the circumstances in which we find ourselves. Say, like we see ladies performing domestic chores and we conclude, that's natural. We say workers surviving on a tiny wage and we say, well, that Uber driver should have studied harder when he was in the UNHCR camp. That's what we call ideology. What Marxists call ideology. So our social relations, the way we survive, cause us to think about the world in a particular way. We don't first think, especially as a mass society, and then produce the society, just as God, in the view of some comrades here, produced the world. We make our ideas to fit the world. It's the hope of Marx to make the world better fit us. He doesn't think that we're necessarily good. He seeks to build goodness or build virtue into the future so that fewer people can, be bad assholes. Or experience badness, like living in an UNHCR camp and then, driving me to a gig in the Wheeler Centre. Communism doesn't rest on a fundamental idea of people being great. It really doesn't all. In fact, probably the opposite is true. People are shit. We need to make the world better. I mean, no, that's not true. But it's not utopian. My God, it could happen. One more big one yet. How can you possibly say that a white, straight, drunk man from the 19th century has anything to offer the hip and groovy down kiddies of today? Or, you know, that quote, if you book by the website where Foucault, fucking sick of Foucault. Did I hear a hell's yeah, as the kids say, as the kids said in 2008. So Foucault says Marxism exists in 19th century thought like a fish in water. That is, it is unable to breathe anywhere else. Oh, thanks, Michel. This is a very common view. And you know, you're all right to consider that a thinker from a previous age and one privileged of education, whiteness and maleness might have some predictable shortcomings. And it is true that he probably got the housekeeper up the duff when his lovely wife, Jenny, was back home begging her family for money to fund this man's crazy project of trying to bring down capitalism. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not the man who wasn't perfect. It's the work. And why is this work important? It's because he probably spent the longest time figuring out what the fuck was wrong with capitalism. Nobody bothers to do that anymore. I'm going to make no claims that Marxism is a completely universal philosophy or one that explains everyone in the world. It does explain capitalism and its coercive force. Since we've largely put him to rest in the last 4 to 5 decades, and then all of these. Do any of you listen to the Chapo Trap House or? All right, so you know it's coming back with the kids. We got 2 of the millennials, and we have. And I'm Generation X, nobody cares about. And you shouldn't either. What did we bring the world? Fucking Nirvana. You know, they weren't that good. Oh, and Google, which is handy but coercive.
But handy.
So there's there's an emerging left, what we would call a more Marxist left. Or a material left, if you will. But see, did you know that he was like a crazy commie? I only found this out a few weeks ago. Really, I mean, I was suspected
That I was a what?
that you were that you were a comrade.
Oh. Well, I'm glad you found out.
So am I. I mean, there was a glimmer of it in your work, but I'm reliably informed that you're a comrade. We were speaking the other day, and when you were just a little chap, 1951, what happened?
10 years old. Well, as I remember, 1951 in Australia was virtually the first year of a conservative government that we hadn't had for a good decade. Before the war was the last time, and it had been the same Prime Minister who'd been ousted by his own people and sent off to graze, and when he came back he'd learned a bit about politics, and we had to suffer under a regime led by Mr Menzies, as we used to call him, Pig Iron Bob, for another 20 years. It was an intolerable amount of time to live under what we regarded as an oppressive regime. Australia was a different country, an unrecognisable country for people who live here now. It was monocultural. It was a repressive, authoritarian censorship. Everything was censored. Every second film was cut in some way, if it wasn't outright banned.
Well, I mean, Australia has a long and ongoing history of censorship, for which I believe we can thank Mr Deakin.
Yes. Well, there's a long history, but it came to a head, it seems to me, in the early 50s. Books were banned, and as I say, films were banned. So what we go on about free speech, there was not a lot of lip service paid even amongst conservatives to the idea of free and open discussion. In fact, Menzies tried to ban it, and that would have been my first political memory as a 10-year-old. The first attempt by our government to ban an entire political party, which was the Communist Party of Australia. And as far as I knew, communists were decent people. They weren't. They didn't have. They weren't boogie people, because most of my family were communists. Probably some of them card-carrying members, others sympathetic, and that's how I grew up thinking of myself as at least a fellow traveller, if I couldn't dot any particular I in a category. But this first attempt to ban the Communist Party, of course, was struck down by the High Court. So interestingly, Menzies had a referendum, and the wonderful thing about this referendum that seemed to go on for years, it can't have been, but I think it was the project to actually stop communist talk in the country seemed to be a preoccupation of Menzies and his ilk. And the wonderful thing was the attempt was defeated. The people... Just, but significantly. I mean, a win is a win, is it not? And it was my boyish impression that there was one person who achieved this result, and it was Bert Evatt, who is a character who is much maligned around the traps these days. Said he was mad. Well, he may have gone mad, but he went mad under extreme provocation. But he
was the person that said it was unconstitutional to ban.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we should probably thank the comrades and Marx himself for their efforts as well.
And well, yes, and Bert would not have been indisposed to that idea, although he didn't. It wasn't de rigueur to go around saying that.
I want to talk to you about then you became a young man and engaged with the ideas of Marx in various ways. I want to talk to you about that in a tick, but there's a really interesting point that you made when you said, the Australia of the past was much different from the Australia of the present, and things were repressive. There was not even a pretense made of the freedom of speech. Now, I want to talk to you, Nazar, about that. There is now an enormous pretense that speech is free, and we can see it on Q&A every Monday night, where you get the nice liberals who just want everyone to love each other, and then you get the unpleasant liberals who say homosexuals are trying to indoctrinate your children, or whatever, but essentially they sort of believe in the same thing. And I mean, particularly as somebody who grew up here from 2001, you would have just been a kid in
I was in school at the time. So when September 11 happened, obviously I grew up as a Muslim, just being another weird ethnic person in Australia. Yeah. White people didn't really know what that meant to be Muslim. I was just like a brown guy, didn't eat pork. But as soon as September 11 happened, we became like a community that was ideologically driven, that kind of had an ideology that was opposed to the Australian way of life. And from then on, whatever we said was, we talked about, you mentioned Asia. I've literally been surveilled by Asia. They've called me up and I've met them. They took me out for free lunch at Blue Train.
This is all true.
It's all very true. Took my friend out as well. They knocked at his door and they were like, "Can we come inside?" And he said, "Well, my friend Nazeem says you guys pay for lunch, so can we go out?" So they went to La Porchetta. I was like, La Porchetta? Anyway, they're paying you, idiot.
You obviously have more capacity to do damage. The more dangerous you are, the better the restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you more stuff if you take me out to... but yeah, it's weird. You can't... I think... There's freedom of speech there's no such thing as freedom of speech in Australia. There's freedom of speech for certain people, for I guess right-leaning white men, really. I don't think even right-leaning women have the freedom to say as much stuff as their male counterparts. We just saw what happened with, Yasmin Abdul-Majid. Yes, she's young and she's a bit naive, politically not as savvy as she probably should have been. But what she said, if that came out of the mouth of an older white man, left or right, I'm sure no one would have cared. He would have just been a guy, ooh.
And that sentiment frequently comes out of the mouth of older white men.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's just, you can't be, to be Australian, to love Australia, means you need to subscribe to a particular idea of what it means to be, or what Australia is. And that's, flag-waving, white Australian that loves the troops and is not critical of any of our institutions in any meaningful way. And
except critical of all of them all, fucking government, et cetera, et cetera.
In a very liberal way.
I mean, the thing about racism mutates over time and in different cultures, and it's like. I don't know, the thing that I've always found is that, like, Australians, perhaps more than other Western nations, need an other in order to define themselves, because what can we say about ourselves? I mean, Max did work and still does work when he can be convinced to try to sort of describe, culturally where we are. And you do that in your comedy as well. But we define ourselves in terms of what we're not. And you can hear this in the language of One Nation, which is un-Australian, like what kind of country says that's un-Australian? Yeah. We have no way to define ourselves.
Oh, we define ourselves in the negative. Whereas at least in America, they can tell you what it means to be American, freedom, whatever. Like in Australia, we know what we're not, and what we're not really, if you gather all those pieces of the puzzle put together, is someone that doesn't, is not from, Australia is a normatively white society, and, everybody else that comes here is used as a way to define without saying white Australia. And so, I think, Muslims know that right now. And I think racism is used as a way to, to justify or to kind of maintain this kind of hierarchy of class. And I think, I hope what's going to happen, I made a joke about it in my stand-up. A guy was trolling me on Twitter, he was like, Nazeem, you're a terrorist that believes in Islam, or as I like to call it, Pislam. And I thought, well, that's a pretty clever pun.
Zappy zinger!
So I like that, it was a good tweet. But, it was back and forth, and it kind of concluded with me saying, we're both two sides of the same coin. We're both just pissed. I'm an angry Muslim, you're an angry white guy. We're both just kind of upset at our social circumstances. Why don't we just join forces? Have a bogan Muslim army march towards Parliament House, Aussie, Allahu Akbar. Anyway, the guy blocked me. But I think, if we can kind of overcome our sort of racial barriers, if that's possible, I think, we might start to understand what we're being fed a little bit. I think the Marxist understanding of things might prove that we've just been misled a lot and distracted from kind of how we've just been shortchanged.
We could actually reinterpret our cultural understanding of what it is to be Australian in Marxist terms. I mean, the Aussie battler, as much as it's been used traditionally to erase class consciousness and suggest that everyone here had to strive really hard and therefore class can't exist, could just as easily become a rallying cry. Because I guess that's that definition when we think about what an Australian identity is like, we're battlers.
We shoot cops, Ned Kelly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, and like there was that story about this time last year, I think, about those gentlemen who'd all gone to St Andrew's College in Sydney. Several of them, were employed by Fortune 500 companies, and they went to Malaysia and dropped their DAX at a motor race. Do you remember this story? And of course, the Australian was saying, "Oh, they're larrikins. They're and if you don't believe that, look, I'm pretty crass, but I don't go around dropping my DAX. It's just bad manners. You would concur, there is such a thing as even Marxist etiquette. In fact, that's a good idea for the next book.
Marxist etiquette.
Yeah, Marxist etiquette. What to wear to the revolution.
It will be televised, right?
Yeah. How to decide who's first up against the wall. No, non-violent revolution. But I just do you see what I'm saying, Max? You were talking about a sort of an oppressive time where there was all sorts of actually quite visible chains upon you. But I mean,
I recognise the continuance of it.
Yeah.
It was a more overt form, I would have said back then. I mean, nowadays you make light of it.
There's the illusion of free speech.
Yes.
They say, this is a free society. It's not like
That's right.
Saudi Arabia.
That's right.
oh my God, you're sounding so Marxist right now. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
Really? Oh my God. Because we said before this, I was like, I don't know if I'm a Marxist, Helen. I need a checklist or something. So you're saying, okay, that's the box ticked.
No, and we will, and perhaps in question time, get to the rather intriguing question of will the end of capitalism herald in the end of racism, or is capitalism possible without racism and all that sort of stuff.
Can I just say, the one thing that it occurred to me that connects Nazeem's Australia with the 50s with the whatever it is we're in now. Some of us lose track of time. Is the word you used, it cropped up, and I thought, we're living in the same world. ASIO, you mentioned. we used to, we didn't live in fear of it, but it was a kind of a nuisance to our conversation. We listened for the clicks on the telephone, and we knew there were people we probably knew sitting that close to us on a tram with little notebooks writing down everything they heard us say.
Now, you probably know now these things are enabled to spy on us directly.
That's directly,
so
apparently.
It doesn't even click
and
at
if you get
anymore.
a particular brand television set, you don't have to have it switched on.
Yeah.
You can just have this conversation sotto voce, privately, and it's picked up and transmitted via Pine Gap to who knows where.
I just, Alyx, I wanted to bring you in here because you've been listening to, well, mostly me bang relentlessly on, but we know each other. That's my habit.
Stop
Max
apologising.
Max is fully authorised to pull my microphone away. Just give him a little sign, and he'll do that. So you're sort of talking about this, this liberal illusion of freedom. Yes. Muslims can speak, but only if they say what the ruling class wants to hear, you can that's kind of like the only dissent possible in public conversation. I can't remember her name, but who was the young no lady? The very attractive youngster.
Pauline.
Yeah, that one from the Liberal Party. Yeah, that one. And, because she was an unlikely candidate, being, hip and with nice hair and with...
They would have launched a nationwide talent search for the prettiest young no they could find.
Yeah. But you have been sort of following the Me Too stuff, and I know that probably a lot of people in this room, and truly, I profoundly mean this with no disrespect. That shit can be triggering, and if you have Me Too'd, fine, no critique whatsoever. But the way in which this thing, which is apparently grassroots, but you should remember was very, very quickly marshalled by large corporations. And, I know that it started at the grassroots, but it became something else.
Well, Lynn Farrelly, who coined the term sexual harassment to begin with, actually said that corporations subsequently stole it from her and sanitised its meaning. But yes, I think the way that we are currently in the grips of something that feels like it could be quite revolutionary in some ways on a gender front, this new power that women have to, the French hashtag wasn't Me Too, it was reveal your pig. And the way that we have the power to now reveal our pigs might feel like we're on the cusp of a new dawn, but the solution that's being proposed is, well, all this sexual harassment, all this violence wouldn't happen if we had more women on boards, if we had more female CEOs, women wouldn't be sexually victimised in quite the same way. And this is the way that our ambitions as young left-leaning women have been curtailed, is that we need to strive to fit ourselves more perfectly into a current structure in the hope that we will remove its nastier elements. We're never really talking about tearing the structure down.
And I understand that, there are a lot of, and Me Too was not just a movement for women. I mean, it is interesting to me how, the particular way in which it was reported in the particular figures that were, unleashed over time.
And of course, this conversation that we're in the grips of is so much focusing on the glossiest, most glamorous forms of sexual assault and sexual harassment. We're talking about the despicable things that are happening to, in the most part, very well-off women, in much the same way that we get very G'd up about the gender pay gap when it's happening to Lisa Wilkinson, but left out of these chats and left out of these figures are the vast majority of precarious service industry workers who can't make their male and female, who don't have any kind of pathway to safely make their own Me Too.
And I mean, the idea, I mean, I understand that the women leading the investigation, which completely takes its cue from US media, which we all know is fantastic. It's like we're going to unleash some names over time. And I mean, it's like, I'm not going to say it in public because I'll probably get somebody into trouble, notably myself. But I know who's coming next. Most people who work in media, it's coming next. And so it's sort of like, a performance, and it's been going on for weeks now. I mean, it becomes almost pornographic. Like, and I know troubling for some victims of abuse, but there is this ardent belief that if we have powerful leaders, then their sense of liberation will trickle down to us.
Yeah, we think that right now what we're doing is weeding out rotten apples, and that's the ritual we're going through right now. But the reality is it's the barrel that's rotten.
And I mean, the issue of one's labour conditions as well in this thing, sort of Tracy Spicer, one of the people who is leading, I'm sure, with the best intentions, this particular investigation. Well, I understand from reading her about her in the press, she became a feminist at some point in her late 30s or early 40s. Welcome. I mean that. Liberal feminism, I suppose, is a step somewhat in the right. No, it's not. Anyway.
No, it's a byproduct of consumer capitalism. That is celebrity culture.
I'm trying to take a tip from Trotsky's friends here and lure them in by lying to them. Not very good at that. Liberal feminism is a bunch of fucking shit. It's so oppressive, and it's just
it does a really beautiful job of putting a super cute hand knitted, ethically sourced, organic pink pussy hat on capitalism.
Yeah, and it's like I can sort of boycott my way out of capitalism and sexist complexes.
As an individual, if you consume as mindfully as possible and make yourself the most flawless, conscious, performatively woke person you can be, then the whole world will change from your goodness.
You're using woke ironically.
It's gotten there. It's already happened.
With no disrespect to our comrades from the Black Panthers.
No, I think celebrity culture has workers. I think they're cultural workers, and it wouldn't be easy being Donald Trump, and he's the pinnacle of celebrity.
I know, but I don't think we need to fight for his wages or his job security.
No, but I spare a thought for the women in his life. I wonder how long they have to prepare themselves for their
I'm sorry,
public
they
appearances.
bought their ticket to the ruling class. Fuck them.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, fuck them. Yeah.
But seriously, don't pity the powerful. Who are you?
Yeah.
I thought we were friends.
Yeah.
So you know, like Tracy Spicer, and I know that she has good intentions, but you know, she believes she's had this personal experience of finding out that there was sexism in media, managing successfully, I believe, from my reading, to come to a payout arrangement with her former employers.
And I mean, the thing is, we've all had personal experience with sexism, and discussing that is valuable, but the fact that literally everyone has had personal experience means that it's structural, and therefore it's the structure that needs to be altered. I think that's what you're saying, right, Helen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just look. All I'm basically saying is that if there's any millennial in the room, you're statistically likely to. I mean, I'm sure there's a few. Statistically likely to be in contract, independent contract, casual or self-employed work. In two of those categories, the Fair Work Act doesn't cover you at all. If you're casual and you complain about sexual harassment, the Fair Work Act still covers you, but you could say, don't harass me, and then you don't get a shift next week. So, I mean, for Christ's sake, you know, like, labour conditions are so unfair and precarious. Of course you're going to shut the hell up about whatever abuse you cop in your workplace. And the exploitation of your body and your mind in the service of somebody else's profit is made more horrible by some douche lord, like, grabbing your bussies or whatever. I mean, not whatever. Having your bussies grabbed without consent is horrid. And can be gut churning. But the point is, if you've got no money, you don't have any options. And at no point in this discussion where we're talking about some television gardener, is anybody saying that people need rights at work which have disappeared. Thank you very much to the ALP, for letting that fucking happen. I mean, 40 years of neoliberalism, you kids have got no future. We're all going to be dead by 2050, and we're talking about hashtags. I mean, what the actual fuck? I've never experienced racism in my life, and I'm not going to be all like pretend humanist and say it hurts me very deeply. I just think it's fucking illogical, and it pisses off my friends. And I mean, we've got to get our shit sorted. Read Marx. In short, sorry. I feel that we need to talk about other things. I'm sorry, did I just embarrass myself?
No, that was awesome. That was amazing. That's got to be
glorious.
animated. I want to see that with like a cartoon, and just anyway, it's great. It was awesome.
What you're suggesting is
Wait,
that the material
translating.
conditions that we exist in might need to be the thing that changes first, and not our ideas.
Thank you, person who was brought up a historical materialist.
She's like your rage translator.
That's quite true. So, I believe that ideas can also inform the material conditions, as our friend Dr. Marx did. But the way in which people live, and I'm sure that many of you don't need to be told. Like a lot of you see your opportunities diminishing, your wages are stagnant, the internal contradictions that Marx describes of capitalism, which are extended, over time. Like first they gave us credit cards so they could pay us lower wages. Now they're talking about this bullshit universal basic income. That is crap. I'll talk to you about that afterwards if you'd like. But this thing is perhaps in your own lives is not sustainable. It's not working for you. It's not working for the many. And if we ignore, of course, how much people have to eat, and whether or not they have, drones whizzing above them, does make a big difference. Did you guys, I know some people probably think she's too conservative or whatever, but when Malala Yousafzai went to visit the Obamas, did you guys see this? And she said, and he was just like, thank you so much for what you've done for the women in your, he may as well have said backward, but he didn't because he was Obama and he's charming country. And she replied, well, and thank you for receiving me, but, could you stop killing
us
Pakistani children? Because you can do everything that you want to urge for, young women to go to school, but if you're killing them and actually bombing the schools,
it's hard to go to school when you're dead.
Yeah,
Nothing like a drone strike to turn a goal off a math class.
Oh dear.
I don't know if we can. I laughed, but I don't know if I was allowed to.
I don't know if I should have said that in that tone. I'm sorry.
I know, Nazeem, during the US elections, I spoke with you a few times, and you had sort of great frustrations because of your knowledge of the global South. You guys, that's what we used to call developing nations or the third world. Now we call it the global South. Some people might have objections to that, and that's fine. You can correct me later.
Yeah, it was the same kind of thing like with Hillary and like Obama. The same sort of like everyone. When Obama got elected twice, after people would come up and talk to me and my friends and be like, "Oh, you must be really happy about Obama," post-race, all that sort of stuff. Like you can cure racism by electing a black guy who, props up capitalism and then therefore goes and bombs, countries abroad. Like I don't know how that, and like how killing thousands of people overseas is in some way progressive politics. And Hillary Clinton, the same thing.
And deporting more people, largely of colour, 3 million over his term, which was more than the sum total of all deportations in the 20th century combined. All the presidents before had not beaten. So he set down the infrastructure for Trump to be like a Trumpy turd.
Yeah, well, and like Hillary's kind of like, isn't she like liked more by the banks? Like during her campaign, didn't 11 CEOs from the Fortune 100 donate to her campaign, but none of them donated to Trump because they were like, well, she's actually more liked by the business sector. She's got more of a chance of the public being interested in these institutions than if Trump was a president. And, I think, again, around Hillary, there's a lot of excitement around her because people are like, well, she'll be the first woman president, therefore sexism is kind of, reduced or diminished, even though she, supported Bush with his invasions where, arguably 1 million innocent people were killed. I don't know how that's done in the service of, eradicating sexism. She... it's just like she's got a problematic relationship with Black Lives Matter. It's I just found the whole thing. I feel like someone like Trump is at least what you get with him. People are a little bit more. They're more woke with him in the office than if you have someone like Hillary, where I think everyone just falls asleep.
You and I were talking the other day about Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail.
Yeah.
And the man had been beaten by both extreme racists and the extreme racists of the state apparatus, but being the coppers. He was in jail, and he says to his fellow clerics from several religions that I've come to the regrettable conclusion, my brothers, that I almost prefer I'm not quoting correctly, but I would almost prefer to confront the Ku Klux Klan and the white moderate who sets the timetable for another man's freedom.
Yeah, and he went on to talk about how the white liberal who might be nice to you, but just sort of tell you to wait it out. Your time will come. Justice will come if you're just patient.
Yeah.
Don't rock the boat. Don't shake the system. And that's kind of what you get with Hillary. You get someone who is going to maintain capitalism for longer than someone like Trump will. I think if, Trump's someone that will just fucking break everything. Whereas
That's the hope, but I think we must do some questions. I didn't even ask you about your leftist youth, but perhaps somebody else will.
I think that's for another time.
Are you satisfied with this?
I don't think we have much choice. I'm just looking at the clock.
Do you need to say something?
No.
Are you sure?
No.
You don't feel exploited or anything? Do you
really.
feel alienated from your labour?
Not particularly now.
Yeah. But anyway, what Nazeem and Alyx were saying was that in every era, the ideas of the ruling class are the ruling ideas. Yeah.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah. It's from a German ideology.
Yeah, that's what we were all saying.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what we're all saying. Yeah.
You can give a little milk and honey, a little bit of like a representation at the highest level, and that allows you to perpetuate the fiction that your iPhone wasn't made by teenagers who are killing themselves in a small factory in China.
Yeah, Apple made them sign a contract at Foxconn that they would not kill themselves. That's just so bizarre.
And they also put trampolines outside the factories. So when people jumped out, they landed on trampolines, literally.
Sounds like a solution to me.
They just bounce straight back in and get back to work.
Perfect.
Not to mention that the poison coltan, the little kids in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is one of those fun, ironic country names, picked up with their bare hands and, died of poison. This is one of the ways in which, not just Apple, but, all of the smartphone manufacturers built their extraordinary wealth. We'd better have some questions. Does everyone feel okay? You all okay?
I feel good.
I've got my phone in here. Should I worry?
I'm just hiding my iPhone.
So I think we've got a question.
So a question, but you have to wait for the lovely microphone.
Yeah, we have a lovely usher just front you that side.
Hey.
Thanks, Helen. Nice to hear from some of the other people. To Max Gillies, you've lived through a lot of years and you've seen changes in Australia. Currently, something has happened today which may be a sign of change. That is, the Senate, as you know, has passed the legislation about same-sex marriage. So we've got a break-up in the Senate now of not just Liberal and Labor, but of quite a different formation. Do you think that there's a good possibility that things in Australia will get better because possibly they can't get worse?
Well, I'm a rather stupid optimist. I always have been, and I always think basically where there's life, there's hope. But there's nothing much more you can say than that. I mean, that's a very small hope. Politics has played out well for the moment, and we should be grateful for the moments where it works. But we don't have a lot of. I don't necessarily think that the Liberal Party is going to finally fall to bits today, and the Labor Party will adopt the Communist Manifesto as its and the place will be transformed.
Thought you were an optimist.
That being said, I think.
But I'm be grateful for small things because there are no big things.
And this is the mobilisation of teenagers in very large numbers. We had, an 80% participation rate from 18 and 19-year-olds. And the first political act that they've done, they've won. I think that is something that we can't underestimate, that a large group of kids, and I'm not necessarily saying that democratic process is always the way, but a lot of them engaged in collective action as well.
Totes.
And now they're activated.
But pessimism, as Gramsci says, or nearly said, pessimism of the intellect, optimism of the will. But the right to be gay married does not guarantee the survival of many people in the LGBTQIA, however many letters now, community who do suffer, despite what Will and Grace tells you, enormous economic hardship. Not all of the homosexuals are rich.
But it is a great political achievement in this country, in spite of the way it was manipulated and set up, and eventually all of us who thought it was a rubbish idea, we all got on board, some of us, and ticked the box, and that became a significant political win, willy-nilly, in spite of the people who were setting it up to make a different point altogether. It was a liberating collective experience, I think.
And meanwhile, Manus Island and growing poverty.
Yeah,
That's exactly why we need a win, Helen. Just give
I know,
us a win.
I know. And you make a great point about optimism.
I love how you're enjoying the tension.
Hi, sorry, I just had a quick question. I'm going to be short for time. Given what Alyx said about the precarity of the workers involved in the sexism scandals coming out, and also Helen's comment about the Uber driver and being from another country, and the race and gender lines along lower class, working class people, I just wondered whether you think maybe something for the left to think about in the scope of like the clusterfuck of the world is maybe looking at labour rights as a focal point for, like on the ground level, whether this is something that the left could, or that Marxism could come back to, whether it maybe is lost sight of it, and that thinking about race and gender through the workers could actually fix more problems than the single one.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely noticed that in the dominant discourse in my Binders Full of Women Writers group, there's a distinct lack of class analysis, and particularly of the way in which our increasingly precarious society is intensifying these divides and making things much worse. And I really do hope that the renewed interest in Marxism means that we start considering class as a key, if not like the fundamental underpinning tenet of any other form of oppression. If we start going, does this person have cash? Does this person have stability? Does this person come from a background that means no matter what they do, they'll be fine, or no matter what they probably won't be fine, as our first question? That would be nice. And Marx is quite good at that.
He is handy. Do you have any other questions? I cannot see.
Like you legally cannot see, right?
I legally can't see.
I have a question. Right here.
There's someone there actually. So I think that person over there's got the mic though.
Thank you very much for this detailed discussion of the Marxism, but I'm not a Marxist person, or not taught much or studied much of the Marxism. My question is related with some technology. Last week, there is a news came that NAB, National Australian Bank, they're going to slash 6,000 jobs because of the digitalization and automations. Now this, I've seen just recently some of the technologies, which is called the exponential technologies, it is claimed that these are the technologies going to democratize democratize the rights of using the technology, and it will make our life better. So I would like to know that in futures, like blockchain technology, it's talked about a lot. So I want to know, in the age of digitalization, how this Marxist ideology will work.
I mean, you're talking about all forms of automation and digital technology.
Yes, digital technology, yes.
That make life easier for the many.
Better. Yes.
Yeah, he was a big fan. I mean, as Max reminded me, he loved a bit of the innovation that capitalism can produce for a long period. He was a great admirer. Yeah. But like onward to fully automated luxury communism, where the robots can do all of the shit work and the rest of the world's population can, not have to clean their loos.
Just hang out.
So you're not a Marxist, but you have studied. So I think it's like chapter 25 of volume 1 of Capital.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I wrote a book about it though. Like, it's not like I'm not quoting him chapter and verse. I'll forget that soon. Where he talks about innovation, and then again in volume 3, chapters 13 and 14.
The Communist Manifesto.
Yeah, and there's a bit of it in the Communist Manifesto as well. But like the sort of time of automation, and it's way too much to get into. Give it up for Nazeem Hussain, Alyx Gorman, and a man who I was cultivating as a friend but probably hates me now, Max Gillies.
And give it up for Helen Razer!
Visit wheelercentre.com for the best in books, writing and ideas from Melbourne, Australia and the world.